and you heard the man. Apparently, we're going to talk about things on Monday night about baseball and stuff. But today's not Monday. Today is a day like no other. Today is a glorious Wednesday morning, and you're probably wondering, Isaiah, who do we have on the show today? And normally we have Aiden, we have Amina, but they both decided they hate us so much and will never be on the show again. No, I'm kidding. They got things to do, preoccupied with other great things in their lives. I'm sure Aiden is somewhere at a desk right now crying his brains out, but good for him. And Amina, we wish you nothing but the best at your new role. But who do we have today? We have Alana, we got Anthony, and we have an ADJ. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mr. ADJ?
How's it going? My name's Brandon Masmarazzo.
There you have it. Brandon Masmarazzo. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Nice.
Call him Maz.
Just call him Maz.
Everybody calls me
M-A-Z-Z.
Maz besides my mama.
I'm going to refer to you as Brandon for the... No, I'm kidding. Guys, we got some things to take care of because it has been a busy world these past few days, especially on the eastern part of it. But before we get started into all our stories of the day, Anthony, you're pulling double duty today, back to back. You got the workload of LeBron James at this point. But please give us the news at 7 a.m.
All right. So in national news, the White House is making an economic argument to persuade lawmakers to address the country's childcare and early learning crisis. The country's childcare and early learning crisis existed before centers began closing due to the coronavirus. The White House's ability to deliver remains unclear. In state news, more than 24 educators raised alarms about declining interest in teaching and other jobs in public schools during a hearing Tuesday with New Jersey state legislators. Speakers told the Joint Committee on Public Schools that applications have been slipping for at least a decade, and the nearly 2-year-long coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated the downward trend. The committee's chairperson, Assemblywoman Mila J. Jacey, said the issues being raised by the speakers will remain a focus. In local news, the Essex County Prosecutor's Office has identified the woman who was killed in a house fire in West Orange on Sunday as 66-year-old Cynthia Johnson. Johnson died after she ran back into her home trying to rescue her cats. The cause of the fire is under investigation. And the weather today is it's mostly cloudy with a high of 65 and a low of 32, with a humidity level of 86% and a good air quality level of 27.
Wow. First, two things to dive into very briefly is that cat story is so depressing, and it was almost part of today's show. But then I thought, I cannot have that much mental weight on my shoulders before 8 a.m. So I decided not to talk about the death of her. But, that's just sad. But in brighter news, guys, the weather. What a transition from death to weather. That's exciting. 65, we get to experience literally all four elements of seasons, I guess, from having a low of 32 to a high 65.
Yeah, when I was doing the research, I go, is that right? Like it's a 40 degree separation between the high and low today. I was like, that
seems
weird.
wild, and then tomorrow is just not even going to be warm at all.
Yeah,
Weather's crazy right now.
New Jersey weather doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't, which is why we should cancel New Jersey. No, I'm kidding. Hey, the sports world yet again is back. Are we going to talk Aaron Rodgers? Maybe is he retiring? Unretiring? He was on the Pat McAfee show. What are we going to talk about, Anthony? I need to know.
I'm on double duty, so here we go. University of Michigan head coach Juwan Howard has been suspended for the rest of the regular season after he struck a coach Sunday following a 77-63 loss to Wisconsin. The university announced that assistant coach Phil Martelli would be filling in for Howard in his absence. Another day, and still there has been no deal between the MLB and the Players Association over the collective bargaining agreement. After some cut downs from the union on the prospect of arbitration and some budging from the league office on minimum salary, it is looking like progress is being made, but it's still not here yet. Aaron Rodgers gave context to his cryptic Instagram post that he posted on Monday. Many speculated that Rodgers might be announcing his retirement after 16 seasons in the NFL, after he posted a slideshow of photos on his Instagram with a caption that read, quote, "To my teammates, past and current, you are the icing on the beautiful cake, as we call our job football." When asked on the Pat McAfee show what it meant, Rodgers responded, quote, "You've got to kind of turn everything else off. So you're not working out, you're not straining or anything. It's kind of a recentering. It not only heals you physically, but I think it takes away mental stress. And then the spiritual part, I think, is it allows you to kind of enjoy the meditations a little more. So when I come out, my first thought is intense, Gratitude for the people in my life. Rodgers is a free agent this offseason, and it remains to be seen if he signs somewhere else or if he elects to retire. Legendary Yankee and four-time World Series champion Paul O'Neill is being inducted into the Yankees Monument Park, and his number 21 will be retired, the team announced yesterday. O'Neill, despite not being a Hall of Famer, will be the 23rd Yankee inducted into Monument Park. And the Islanders took home a W last night against the newly founded Seattle Kraken with a 5-2 win. Left winger Zach Parise had 3 points in the W.
Wow, the sports world was electric. But I have to ask before we get into our first story, because the Juwan Howard story is quite a huge thing,
Yeah.
especially in the world of college basketball. Do you guys think that suspension was big enough, or was it too much?
It was.
Go
Go ahead, man.
Oh no! I thought he was gonna get fired because
Yeah.
there's usually coaches have way tighter leashes than players when it comes to stuff like that. Like if you strike someone, especially as a coach, you're in a position of power like that. That's usually grounds for either automatic termination or somewhere along the line of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I think the suspension was right what it should have been. This isn't just a regular coach. This is somebody that is synonymous with Michigan, being part of the Fab Five with Chris Webber and Jalen Rose, and he didn't initiate contact because the Wisconsin coach put his hands on him first, and then the situation escalated from there, and then he responded the way that he did. So I think what was it, a 5-game suspension?
It was the regular season.
It was the rest of the regular season. So it's like 4 or 5 games. I think it was just right for what it needed to be. It wasn't that crazy, but he's definitely going to be on a tight leash moving forward.
Yeah.
I'd imagine, especially considering the backlash that instantly followed. And I think a lot of people were making the argument if he had a little more remorse in his press conference after the whole thing went down, it maybe have been less. I don't believe that, considering regardless, either way, he was going to get suspended. And I think a lot of people even thought he was going to get fired, like you mentioned, Anthony, because as a coach, you can never lay your hand on anybody. So, it's going to be interesting to see how much wiggle space he has on the rest of his Michigan tenure. But yeah, good luck to the Wolverines. I don't really know much about college basketball, but it definitely is a fun environment like most college sports.
March Madness.
It's almost here, guys. But we have some heavy news in the morning yet again because our not good friends. I lied. Russia and Ukraine updates, everyone. As tensions are at an all-time high in the east as Russia continues to look more likely to invade Ukraine. On Tuesday, Russian lawmakers authorized President Vladimir Putin to use military action outside of his country. Meanwhile, the United States and other European countries have all responded by adding sanctions on Russian leaders and banks. As of now, Putin has the power of 150,000 troops surrounding 3 sides of Ukraine. Now, from the American perspective, President Biden has held back on even tougher sanctions that could cause an economic downfall for Russia, but said that they would go ahead if there's further aggression from Russia. The U.S. has also repositioned some troops in the Baltic nations on NATO's eastern borders. This was done as a response to Russian forces advancing into rebel-held areas in eastern Ukraine. Putin created even more controversy, acknowledging the rebel areas as independent separatist regions, which is against the demands of the U.S. and most European nations. President Biden added, quote, "We are united in our support of Ukraine. We are united in our opposition to Russian aggression." Bars. When it comes to Russian claims of a pretext for invasion, Biden made it clear, quote, "None of us should be fooled. None of us will be fooled. There is no justification. It has appeared that hopes for a diplomatic solution have evaporated at this point, as U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken canceled plans on Thursday in a meeting in Geneva with his Russian counterpart, saying it would not be productive and that Russia's actions indicated Moscow was not serious about a peaceful path to resolving the crisis. Finally, Western nations sought to present a united front with more than 24 European Union members unanimously agreeing to levy their own initial set of sanctions against the Russian officials. Germany also said it was halting the process of certifying the Nord Stream 2 gas line pipe from Russia, which is said to be a massively lucrative deal that the U.S. is very much against because it says that Europe nations would be relying too much on Russian energy. Whew, that was a marathon, but we got through it, guys. A lot of information to unpack. This situation is only continuing to escalate. And something that I noticed that I feel that might be the problem, especially from our perspective, is that a lot of people, when they talk about this, they are only saying it from an American lens, where it's like, oh, we need to do this, 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 but they're not really looking at it from the humanitarian set. Whereas from the eyes of someone that lives in the Ukraine, because these people are constantly living fear now. And I don't think that has been brought up enough by most news outlets, where imagine that was happening to us. Say like Canada is the super aggressive nation, and day by day they're adding more troops into regions of your own country, and the fear of being invaded and having your home destroyed is quite a scary place to live in. So I'm interested to know, what do you guys think of this situation right now?
And I have to agree, like that must be horrifying to like constantly think about. I have a teacher who came from Ukraine, and I think she still has family who lives in Ukraine. So she must be like freaking out, trying to make sure that her family is still okay.
100%. Anthony?
Yeah, I've definitely been keeping tabs on this whole situation, and you definitely start to fear what's going on over there. And I actually have been taking an international relations course this semester, and the one day our professor brought in a woman who works within like the Ukrainian government, and she like he had good relationships with her, and she came on and just pretty much discussed what everything was going on like within Ukraine, because I think she just like sort of left a few weeks ago, and just hearing it from someone who is right in the thick and thin of it it's tough, because then you could tell that she's pressed because she wants to help her family, but she also wants to help her country. And it's also you gotta think what she has to like, what her thought process goes into these dealings. And for our United States point of view, we have to protect our allies, because we know if it was us, they would do the same thing. So it's a moral reason why the U.S. is also want to protect Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as of now, at least, that the U.S. doesn't plan on intervening military wise. It seems to be that the strategy for most countries right now is to create sanctions to destroy most of Russia's economy, which would hopefully prevent them from leading out an invasion. But it's going to be interesting, especially monitoring this situation, because it has been tracked pretty much for the past 2 weeks on the Morning Buzz, because it is a massive story, and really it can change at any moment. Like it could change literally right now, and we'd have to talk about it even more. But I will say, once again, I think what you mentioned is sometimes hearing stories from people that are actually part of the situation does a lot for someone to recognize exactly what's going on. And it reminds me of this podcast that I listened to where, you know, the United States was in the Middle East for quite some time. Whether they wanted to say it was a war on terrorism, that could be debated. But there was an interesting point that was brought up to me, where is this person that he went to the Middle East to help people out, pretty much. I forget what the peacekeeper, not a peacekeeper. There's an organization where you like help people, I guess. But he said he went there and he didn't realize how bad it was until he finally understood from someone's perspective in Afghanistan. And I think to give someone a different perspective is, imagine if you are in Afghanistan and people always wonder, why does the Middle East hate the United States so much? Well, imagine this is that you're living your normal life and all of a sudden you have drones and bombs bombing your city and everyone around you. So I think when people are surprised by the hatred people have for America sometimes, just try to view it as a perspective from those people, because they aren't the bad people. They're human the same way that we are human. So hopefully that can give you some perspective and ideas of what the Ukraine is going through right now. We have some interesting news, actually positive. You know, the first two stories were a little bit rough, but they're things you need to know about. But now we have some U.S. women's soccer talk. Woo! As U.S. women's national team players have finally scored the goal that they were looking for. See what I did there? All right, I'll fire myself. After years of fighting for equal pay, U.S. soccer is set to pay $24 million to settle a discrimination dispute that the women's national team had sued them for in previous years. U.S. soccer doubled down on the settlement as they will also equalize pay and bonuses to match the men's team. The face of the movement, Megan Rapinoe for equal pay, was very excited about the historic moment in women's sports. Quote, I think we're going to look back at this moment and just think, wow, what an incredible turning point in the history of U.S. soccer that changed the game and changed the world really forever. The two sides announced a deal on Tuesday that will have players split $22 million, about 1/3 of what they sought in damages. U.S. Soccer also agreed to establish a fund with $2 million to benefit the players in their post-soccer careers and charitable efforts aimed at growing the sports for women. This effectively brings to a close the gender discrimination lawsuit players filed in 2019. Guys, this is somewhat feel-good news, right?
Yeah. Good job.
Something was accomplished for once in law. That's great. I will say it's interesting to me. Very happy for them, but obviously, we should point out the negative first, just get it out of the way. But the fact that they didn't settle for the only 1/3 of what they sought in damages is a little surprising to me, because I feel like they had a valid case. Well, because when it comes to the NBA versus WNBA, for the most, this is my opinion, guys. You can kind of understand why the pay is different, considering the fact that the WNBA clearly does not generate much revenue as the NBA does, and that's just the sad truth. People do not watch women's basketball on a consistent basis. It's great, it's fun to watch, but it doesn't have as big of a market as men's basketball. But yeah, so obviously we hope that they get better rights too, but to say equal pay is a tough thing to say, I feel, and that's my opinion. I'm sure someone will disagree with me. But when it comes to U.S. women's soccer, you can clearly see how much the U.S. women's soccer team is a lot better. And it looks, for the most part, that their crowds are always much fuller compared to their men counterpart. So to see that they had to settle for 1/3 is definitely interesting. And I wonder why they would go that route, because I thought they had a valid case.
Yeah, they're definitely one of the more popular national teams.
Yeah.
The Women's World Cup I think it's as big as the Men's World Cup. Whenever I see the Women's World Cup, it looks like they fill out stadiums just as good as the men do. So I've never really saw a problem with that. I think there's always a market for women's soccer in the United States. I think it's just as big as the men. So finally, with this sort of strike of the gavel, we finally get to see that women's soccer player getting paid as much as the men's soccer players, and it's good to see that we finally have something like this.
Yeah, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm gonna be that guy for like real quick. But hear me out. It's like I don't know what the women's team brings in revenue. You know, that's what it comes down to. Success doesn't matter. They're clearly much better than the men's team, but there's players in the WNBA, take like an Elena Deladon or a Diana Taurasi, that are much better than the counterparts in the NBA, but they're not making as much money because they don't have as much value in terms of bringing in revenue. And that's just the sad truth at the end of the day. So if they're bringing in equal amount of revenue as the men's team, then yeah, absolutely, they deserve that pay. I don't know what those numbers are. If they're making more than they deserve, even more than the men, it's going to come down to the revenue numbers at the end of the day for me. But
I could give you the revenue numbers. As of 2019, women's soccer actually generated more than men's soccer.
Then they need more pay than them.
Exactly. They generated $1.9 million more revenue than the men's did.
I think there's a more of a market for the women's national team than there's for the men's national team.
100%.
I don't see any news.
They win.
Yeah, I don't see any news for the men's national team. I would see they lose to like a Caribbean team and they don't make the World Cup. That's all I see from them.
Yeah.
Well, it's also at the same time too, like the men have the possibility of playing against like a Lionel Messi, where I'm going to be honest with you, outside of the U.S. women's soccer, I really can't name that many international players. You know, I'm not saying that they're not great. I'm just saying they're not at the same
Like
level as a U.S. women's player, you know, where you have international soccer, you have guys that are at LeBron James status, if not higher standards, you know, because it's international.
I have a question. Are you a soccer fan of women's soccer?
Me?
Yeah.
I like the national team. Obviously, I think they're dope. It's just I don't know who they're playing half the time because they just dominate everybody. So it's kind of even hard to learn another player when they're winning, 4-0. You know,
I think what also could be it is that I don't want to assume, but I imagine that you're not really actively searching for women's soccer around the world or anything. You just watch when the US is on.
Basically.
So I'm sure there are stars, but then again, it's just not as mainstream as international men's soccer. because that is a whole different animal, and it is bigger than the NFL and the NBA and the MLB, and that's just the truth. And people like to say, "Oh, that's not true." Well, look, it is. Just because you are in the United States doesn't mean that the rest of the world watches the same thing as you do. So yeah, I think maybe it is just because it's not as mainstream as some of the other bigger international stars like Messi or Ronaldo or Neymar, all those big names. Um, and yeah, so I think maybe that's probably part of it. But I will say that the U.S. women's team has been dominant for seemingly the past 10 years.
20 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I cannot
They've
remember
been
like
dominating
the
since
last
90s.
time women's soccer has been bad, which is great. So yeah, I think maybe it's just we're just not it's not really covered as much, and that's why we don't know those names. But I'm sure they are out there because you've seen a lot of competitive games on for women's national soccer. But yeah, congratulations to U.S. women's national team. I don't want to focus on all the negatives. Lana, how does this feel from a woman's perspective? Are you happy?
Yeah, this is a good thing for women. Well, I don't know sports ball at all, but
Sports ball.
My favorite segment.
but this is a really good step in the right direction for like just the equal pay issue in general. Yeah, I have to agree that I'm not sure why they only did settle for 1/3, because they did have a very strong case. But this is a good step in the right direction of finally, like, for women actually like getting like equal pay.
Yeah.
Women are just as capable as men to do.
You heard that, everyone. Lana said it, and I agree with it. But yeah, we're gonna move on to something that I watched a documentary not too long ago. And by documentary, I'm not saying like a 5-hour docuseries on Netflix. It was like 10 minutes. And then I did some research afterwards. But it is important that I feel that we understand the story and maybe get more eyes and ears on it. But there's a crisis going on in one of our states that people love to forget about, which is Hawaii, as affording a single family home in Oahu is getting tougher, according to local real estate companies. But efforts are apparently underway by legislators to help make sure local families aren't priced out. Many native Hawaiians can't afford to live in Hawaii anymore, as the average price of a single family home in Maui is over $1.1 million. I'm going to stress that again because it is not a mansion. It is not a 19-bedroom fancy house or anything. It is a single family home. Is over $1.1 million. And it gets worse because the average salary of a worker in the tourism industry is less than $40,000 per year, and the state's average is almost $78,000 a year. Good Lord. Record-breaking home prices and fast-paced markets have lawmakers calling this a housing crisis. Senator Stanley Chang of Hawaii said, quote, I saw a report recently that showed the median house prices of Kauai at $1.725 million. If there's anyone in Hawaii who thinks these are reasonable prices that local families can afford, I have yet to meet them. He says the state is only able to build about 2,000 homes per year, and he is also said to be pushing state-owned lands to build more homes for locals, calling them aloha homes. Basically, every local family would have access to a home that would cost as low as $400,000 each. It would be kind of like a public school for housing, a low-cost option that is available regardless of their circumstances. Chang is also pushing to create a state department of housing to better advocate affordable housing for local families. Quote, we need to build more. That's the bottom line. We need to build more and take care of our own. Whew. Guys, this is insane to me because the documentary that really sparked this story for me was talking about the homelessness in Hawaii and how so many people, they used to live in these areas, and tourists and Americans from the mainland have been coming to Hawaii and buying up a lot of land purchases and buying a lot of these apartment complexes and then changing the rent because more people are wanting to move to Hawaii these days.
Yeah.
So the video cited there's this woman that was living in this apartment complex. She was paying $14,000 a month in rent. And then the apartment complex was sold to a real estate investment company. And then her rent jumped to $1,900, which for those who don't know, that's an extra $500 a month for this one woman trying to live on her own. Therefore, she could no longer afford to live in that apartment complex and couldn't find any other apartments nearby, considering they've all been bought up by other real estate companies, which then led her to be homeless. And she's been homeless for, I think, about 10 months as of when that video was made, which is very sad because there's nothing she can really do about it. You know, she's working 2 jobs already. She's been trying to provide for herself, and she's been living in a car and trying to be as positive as she can. But this is a real crisis where local Hawaiians are being kicked out of their own land that they were born in and that they lived, grew up in, and for them to just be forced to leave because, you know, tourists are becoming permanent residents at this point, because obviously people love Hawaii and the weather and all this stuff, and people go there to retire. But it's very sad to see that this is happening to our own American people. And I think a lot of people, especially when you think of places like Hawaii or Puerto Rico, they forget that they're Americans too. So they're almost kind of the forgotten territories and states of the United States. But yeah, this is sad and hard to even, because that documentary was hard to watch because the situation is so similar to the same exact thing going on in Puerto Rico. And it's very odd how much they mirror each other. Except the problem is that Hawaii is just a couple months ahead of Puerto Rico, if that makes sense. And that's the sense that they've been dealing with this problem a little bit longer, and now people are starting to go to Puerto Rico instead of Hawaii and all this other times. Yeah, both are dealing with an intense crisis for their locals. And I'm interested to know what you guys think about it.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I got some family that are from Puerto Rico and stuff, and the entire situation going on there it's rough, you know. And then you look at Hawaii, like this is a state, not just like a territory, facing something like similar. So for people that you said it perfectly, like, we don't think of people of Puerto Ricans as being American, but they absolutely are. Like they're a territory, like, you know, they do everything that we do except have the power to vote. You know, Hawaiians on the other hand, it's just like being in New Jersey. They have the power to vote. Like these are, you know, people that have the same power of us, and it's rough to see them go through that. And I think it's a slap in the face to be like, oh, we're gonna get the cost down to $400,000. That's if that's doing any better. If you're making $40,000 a year, the difference between a 1.1 million home and a $400,000 home, I feel like that's like obviously there's a big gap between them, but that still seems out of reach for me if I was making $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know I don't even know how to fix this, but it's just everything's gone through the roof, especially with like the housing market, and it's just insane at this point. And we just got to figure out a way to just make things more affordable for the average person.
Absolutely.
There's other expenses that these people need to cover as well. Food, the use of a car, things like that, and clothing. And if that's part of what the 40,000 is, having to spend 400,000 each on a home, it's just not doable. And they shouldn't have to, like that woman had to do 2 jobs just to take care of her own personal self.
Yeah.
That should not be necessary.
When you buy a house and you sign your mortgage, you're pretty much signing your life away. You have to pay that mortgage for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And now in Hawaii, when you're making 40,000 a year, you have to pay for a home that can go upwards of $1 million. You might have to take even a longer mortgage on that. And just think about that. You're paying for something that you're living in for more than half your life.
Think about this, Ant. You think somebody that's making 40K is going to be able to get a loan for a $1.1 million home?
Absolutely not.
They can't afford these. Good luck
not.
getting a loan for a $400,000 home.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that, that's actually why the woman in the documentary decided to live in a homeless place, because she could have signed a lease for whatever that property was, but she wouldn't have been able to afford it. So she decided that I'm going to live homeless because I can't have an eviction notice on my record, which would prevent me from obviously having other financial opportunities in the future. It's definitely a sad situation. And when it comes to Puerto Rico, at least, I think the problem that they're facing right now is that there's no tax for people that are coming into Puerto Rico and building all these properties and living there, which is why so many people, especially I think you saw both Paul brothers move to Puerto Rico. It's not because they love the island. It's because they don't have to pay taxes there. They don't have to pay property taxes the way that they would have to pay in other states, and like especially in California. It made sense business wise to go to Puerto Rico because they can do all their training stuff there, have all these nice fancy houses, all that stuff. So I think that is probably the main problem for Puerto Rico right now, is the fact that there is no penalty for these rich billionaire and millionaires coming in and building all these places and pricing locals out. And I think there should be heavy taxes and more opportunities for locals, because how is that fair to the people that live there? They don't have the same opportunities as most quote unquote Americans do on the mainland, because it's just not possible in Puerto Rico compared to the other places, because the average payment per job is definitely a lot different salary wise. But yeah.
As is, when you have the money, you can do those things without the repercussions.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
I think
That's the
Isaiah brings
problem.
up a good point where it's like, think about like in-state tuition for college. You can't do like an in-state rate for a resident of those places for like the residents that have actually been there.
Mhm.
Like they could definitely figure out something
Yeah.
to help out the locals.
But the problem is, do they actually want to? And it seems so far
Exactly.
that there is no real motivation for most government officials to truly help out the people around them, which is sad and disheartening, considering that this is where the people live. This is where they grew up, and this is the environment that they know. And the fact that they're being forced out is definitely a sad thing. And hopefully one day that problem is solved. It doesn't look bright, but part of us as humans, we always have a little bit of hope, even when it's very dark. Anyways, guys, we have a massive story. No, it's not breaking news, but it is interesting. You guys remember the Spotify car thing, where it was like this free? Okay, let me explain. So the car thing was a seemingly PR stunt done by Spotify, where it was this little device you would put in your car that would play Spotify. You could tell it to play your music or podcast, blah 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 blah. So you plug it into your car, and then you cruise on down the road. Well, for a while it was free if you claimed it enough time on their website through email or something like that. And then eventually no one could get it because obviously there's a high demand for it. And it was free, so naturally people would want it. So now you have your chance to get your dirty hands. You're just no, I'm kidding. You get to have the chance to get this car thing for a price now, as Spotify is entering the hardware market yet again with the car thing. And for those who don't know, it's a smart music player meant to sit on your dashboard. The company released a car thing to a limited number of subscribers not too long ago, but now you can buy the device for $90. Plus, in order to use it, you need a premium subscription. And for those who don't know, that's probably $10 or $16, depending on which ones you want to get. The device is meant to provide a way to listen to Spotify in your car without the needs to look at your phone or deal with the clunky built-in car interfaces. A 12-volt power adapter connects the car thing to your car's auxiliary power outlet, and the device then connects to your phone via Bluetooth. Finally, you can connect the device to your car stereo using an aux cord, Bluetooth, or USB. The player also supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Voice control is the device's most prominent feature, as you can control the car thing by saying, "Hey Spotify," followed by a command like shuffle my songs, play this, play that, blah 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 blah. But there's still some things you can do on the car thing, like adding songs or adding podcasts to your queue. But Spotify is said to be working and adding more commands. Guys, I did some more research about this as well, because I was like, would my 2005 Honda Civic even be able to use a device like this, considering in 2005, most cars did not have an aux cord? So I thought, I wonder if there's a way where I could somehow connect to my car using it. And there is not a way for my car, and I imagine millions of other cars of people not having fancy cars already, to use this Spotify car thing. So obviously it needs to have power, so you put it into your auxiliary smoker thing. But for my car, since I don't have an auxiliary cord, I already have to put something in there that connects to my phone via Bluetooth, and then it links up to an empty radio station channel, and then you can play music, and it somehow sets the frequency correctly, and then I can listen to music. It still has static, but it's not terrible. But at least I can listen to music. But for people like me, I cannot use this, and I'm not too disappointed either, considering I'm not entirely sure why this is needed. If people like me cannot use it, because most cars, if you don't have that already, they already have a display on their car. So what is the like? It's just you want an extra screen in your car? I don't get it.
Yeah, I can use this, and I will not be using it. And I'm a big Spotify guy.
Me too.
That's my views only. And it's why do you need this? You already have like the car interface. Like if the car's interface is that bad, why did you buy the car?
Yeah.
You know, if you don't like the interface that much, probably time for a new car.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm driving around my mom's 2016 Subaru Outback. It's fine. It works. Like, and why is it called a car thing?
It's an awful name.
That is a terrible name.
To be fair, I think it describes their thing perfectly.
Just call it a car.
Just call it a car thing.
Just call
Yeah.
it like a ride along or something. I don't know. You could have named it anything but that.
No, I feel you.
Car
Definitely
things.
very lazy.
I'll stick to
Somebody
my
got
aux.
paid to come up with that name, by the way.
They
Yeah.
got paid a lot to come up with that.
Unbelievable.
I'll
Pulled
stick
up
with my
to the
aux.
boardroom meeting and was like, guys, I have this genius idea. We've heard a lot of other names pitched, but how about this car thing? And the room went wild.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. That's the $1 million
You
idea.
know what?
We did it.
You're now our HR director.
Yep.
Um,
$90 for something that the phone already does.
I know. I just don't get the use of it either. And then they say that voice is the primary feature of it. Your phone already has voice commands. I literally say all the time, "Hey Siri, play this song on Spotify." I don't even say Spotify anymore. I just say play this song or skip this song. Because you know when you're driving on Route 80, you don't want to like touch your phone apparently. So I use my voice commands. So I really don't understand who this is for, why this is being made, and who are the dumb people buying it. Because $90.
Here's the thing too.
Yeah.
Spotify's got enough on their hands right now with that whole
Go ahead, say it.
the whole
say it.
Joe Rogan situation.
Say the R word.
Rogan.
Rogan.
Yeah, so Spotify's just looking for anything to get their brand off of that right now.
I feel you. I think that somewhat has died down.
Imagine this.
For now.
The Rogan controversy. Release the car thing.
Release the
That's-
car thing.
He's like, my bad, guys.
Guys, we found out Joe Rogan is doing something. Release the car thing now. We gotta get people off
No,
our
how
brand.
about this? The ultimate way to flip Joe Rogan is to do it Oprah style. So on a show, he says, everyone, look out your door. So every Spotify premium subscriber,
Oh, I know. what
car
you're gonna
thing
say.
outside.
You get a car
You
thing.
get a car.
You get the car
Exactly.
thing.
Everyone gets a car thing.
You can keep the car thing.
Yeah, it'd just be like, I'm not
Oprah,
gonna
can I
use it.
return this?
Where's my car?
Can I can I sell it for the $90?
Car thing sponsored by Joe Rogan.
Wow, genius. It's like Beats by Dre, Car Thing by Rogan, or Car Thing by Joe. There you go, guys. It's bound to happen. I'm very excited to see the future of Joe Rogan and the car thing. Sarcastic, obviously. But yeah, once again, I'm very interested to see if a lot of people buy it. As I was doing research for the show, I went down a mini spiral because, from time to time I like to look at tech. So I saw a couple of videos of the car thing, and there was two different perspectives. It was one guy that clearly looks like he's been paid off because he's way too excited about the Spotify car thing. Like, this is groundbreaking, guys. My car is insane. My 2021 Nissan Altima's display is terrible, but this one is so much better and easier to use. Meanwhile, his wheel has like a forward and backward button and all this play, pause, adjust volume. Like, sir, you already have everything you need. Anyway, and then the other perspective was just like, yeah, we have it, but we are not going to use this. We don't see why we need to use this. It's a gimmicky, I guess. It's trendy. I don't know if that's really going to catch on much, but yeah,
Have you seen a picture of this thing?
yeah,
I just looked it up. It's the glorified TomTom that acts like
pretty
an
much.
iPhone.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's a
an
great
iPhone.
explanation.
like you could always just get like one of those clamps for the cell phone.
Yeah,
Put it up there. If you got Bluetooth in the car, you already got the button that you have like the voice command for things. I don't know what's
Is
going on.
this what it's like? I don't know people on video.
No, it's this one right here. Like,
Here, show it to the camera. real quick.
okay, it looks like
before
this.
we go to break, I'll give the Facebook Live users a cinematic experience as
Yeah.
I pull up the car thing.
Yeah, there it is. That's it.
But yeah,
My mom used to have
Boom.
one of those in her car when I was like a little kid.
It looks
It's a
like
TomTom, dude. It's a TomTom.
it really is. It's
Yeah.
like a mini GPS
And it
looking
works
thing.
From the screen. It looks just like an iPhone like interface. So they're really just
Yeah, I
they're
remember
robbing
my
people.
mom
Yeah.
used to have one
Spotify
like
is
that.
robbing people.
It's a reach. It's definitely a big reach. But yeah, this is what it looks like for all you Facebook Live peoples and for radio listeners. Sorry. But yeah, that has been the Spotify car thing.